Hola, clase. In this chapter, we're going to be learning about a new tense called the present subjunctive. In this video, I'm going to teach you what the subjunctive tense is and show you how to conjugate regular verbs in the subjunctive. The subjunctive tense in Spanish is a tense that has a lot of different uses. It's a little bit difficult to define because we don't really have a subjunctive tense in English, as you'll see when we do translations from the subjunctive tense to English. The subjunctive tense in Spanish is used whenever there's a lot of uncertainty involved. So a lot of times we use the subjunctive when we're talking about future events that haven't happened yet, and we're not really sure what will happen at those future events. We use them for events or things that are out of our control. So whenever we want or wish or recommend that somebody else would do something, we use the subjunctive tense. We use the subjunctive for opinions. So whenever we are talking about how we think the world is, although other people might think it's different, right? So we end up using the subjunctive in Spanish just so that to show the fact that we're a little bit uncertain about how those things are. So as you can see, the subjunctive gets used for a lot of different things, and it gets used for kind of abstract concepts. And so as far as the uses for the subjunctive, we're going to break it down and just do one use at a time. And that's why you'll see the acronym WeirdoCat on your screen. And so the acronym WeirdoCat has all of these different letters that represent different uses for the subjunctive. So you'll see the W in WeirdoCat represents wants and wishes. We're going to talk about that this year. E stands for emotion. The I stands for impersonal expressions. We'll also talk about impersonal expressions this year. R is for recommendations. D is for doubt. O is for ojalá. C is for conjunctions. A is for adjective clauses, and T is for time conjunctions. Now, you don't have to memorize this acronym WeirdoCat or any of the different letters and what they mean, although we will be using it and we'll be working through it during Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. So this year in Spanish 2, we'll only be covering I, impersonal expressions, and W, wants and wishes. And as we focus in on each of these letters, we'll be able to unpack a little bit more what the subjunctive is and how we're going to use it. But for now, just think of the subjunctive as a tense that we use whenever we're uncertain of the future, whenever we're uncertain of the outcome on our wants and wishes and hopes. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at how to conjugate regular verbs in the subjunctive tense. If the whole idea of the subjunctive is a little bit complicated, like what it is and when we use it, we'll get to that part. That part will unpack a little bit over time. But when it comes to forming the subjunctive is not really that difficult, especially since you already know how to form commands. As you're going to see, forming the subjunctive is very similar to forming commands. So if you've got a regular verb and you're wanting to change it into the subjunctive tense, you're just going to do 3 steps. These 3 steps are the same steps that we used when we wanted to create usted and ustedes commands. So first step, put the verb in the yo form of the present tense. Let me pause here and remind you that some verbs are irregular in the yo form of the present tense. So like go verbs, for example. So make sure that you're careful when you go to the yo form of the present tense that you get the correct conjugation to start with. The second step is remove the yo. So you drop the yo off of the end. And then the third step is add opposite endings. And as you'll see in the next screen, we're going to add those opposite endings for all 5 forms, no matter who our subject is. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so here are 3 of our regular verbs: hablar, comer, and vivir, our AR, ER, and IR verbs. And as you can see, that for the verb hablar, which is a regular AR verb, all we have to do is go to the yo form of the present tense, so hablo, we take off the O, and then we add the opposite endings. So hable, hables, hable, hablemos, hablen. You can see we do that all the way through. We just add the endings that we would usually put on ER and IR verbs in the present tense onto our AR verbs. So that's our opposite endings. For the verb comer, we go to the yo form of the present tense. So como, we drop the O, then we add the opposite ending. So coma, comas, coma, comamos, coman. We add the endings that we would have put on our AR verbs. And then vivir, it's an IR verb. We go to the yo form of the present tense, vivo, we drop the yo and we add opposite endings. So viva, vivas, viva, vivamos, and vivan. It's really this simple. Whenever you see a regular verb, just do the 1, 2, 3 steps. And then depending on your subject, add the opposite ending. Now, like I said, we can't forget that when we go to the yo form of the present tense, we're going to run into some verbs that don't behave according to the rules. And so a big category of those verbs that we've got to think about are go verbs, all right? So your go verbs are going to look like this, because let me show you here on the top. If you go to the yo form of the present tense for the verb hacer, it's hago, right? And then we drop the O, and then we add the opposite ending. So we end up with haga, hagas, haga, hagamos, and hagan. Poner, if we go to the yo form of the present tense, it's pongo, right? Not pono. So pongo, we drop the O, we add the opposite endings, ponga, pongas, ponga, pongamos, pongan. You did this with your commands, right? Your usted and ustedes commands and your -2 commands. So this is not completely new to you, which is a good thing. Tener becomes tengo, drop the O, add the opposite endings, tenga, tengas, tenga, tengamos, tengan. Now these are the first 3 go verbs, but let me show you on the next slide the other go verbs that you also need to keep in mind. All right, so here are the other go verbs that you need to keep in mind. There's 7 more here, so there's about 10 go verbs that are really important to remember. Of course, there are more, but these are the most common. Keep in mind that this looks maybe a little bit overwhelming, like there's a lot of things that you have to remember here, but you really don't. All you need to remember is that you take these verbs to the yo form of the present tense. So decir becomes digo, all right? And that's really all you have to remember, because then the rest of it is simple. You just take off the O and add your endings, diga, digas, diga, digamos, digan, all right? So as long as you can remember that oír is oigo, venir is vengo, traer is traigo, you'll be fine, because then you'll just add the endings that you need. Caer is caigo, salir is salgo, and seguir is sigo. Now, this is not all of the irregularities in the subjunctive, but this is where we're going to start. Go verbs are really considered regular verbs in the subjunctive because they follow the 3 steps. You go to the yo form, you drop the O, and you add the opposite endings. We will get to irregular verbs in the subjunctive later on. We're going to go ahead and end the lesson here. And then in the next lesson, we'll be taking a look at some of the uses of the subjunctive tense. So that's all for today. Adios, amigos.